What is up, everybody? Brian Mendler back in your life on this beautiful Monday in May. And I am super excited today to be joined by literacy expert and guru, the great Jen Jones. It's good to see you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Brian? Thanks for having me on your show.
I'm good. It's so good to see you and have you. And I just want to kind of start by going through your history, your life. Like, how did you become a literacy person? When did that start for you?
Wow, that is really interesting question. Definitely did not, I was an English major in college. Definitely did not see becoming like a literacy person. Was even going to be a lawyer, right? So I was like, really love to speak and argue and critical thinking. I've always been about that. But then I got my post-baccalaureate in elementary education because there was a teaching shortage at the time. And then just became a reading recovery certified about 3 years after I became a teacher. And I actually really fell in love with problem solving word attack with kids, like really helping kids learn how to read at the word level. And I think that's the one pain point where teachers really need the most amount of help is like, yeah, but how do I help my kid read the words? So like that whole decoding piece. Then I went back and got my master's in reading education and never really just even decided like I'm going to do what I do now, like literacy coaching and literacy PD, like that just kind of happened, organically evolved out of being just a good reading teacher in the classroom, I think, and just people seeing in me what I didn't yet see in myself. And that was the power to influence and motivate and really provide PD to people and teachers in a motivational, bite-sized, actionable way, which is the feedback that I get a lot from teachers and principals is that they say, Jen, you just share it in a way that teachers get it and they feel like empowered that they can do it and motivated, like, and confident to go try it at least. So here I am. That's what I do.
What about before that though? Like, what about as a kid? What were you a good student in school?
I
Where did you grow
was,
up?
yes, so sorry about that. I was a good kid in school. I was a teacher pleaser, a people pleaser. I wanted to do the right thing. I followed the rules. I didn't really get in trouble. I had really good handwriting, which is good handwriting fakes teachers out, for the record. Yep, a lot of teachers will be like, oh, this is a really well written piece. Well, it might not actually be well written, but it's in really nice handwriting, so I'll give you an A. So I just, I for as a metaphor, but like when I would color, I would stay in the lines. I didn't love reading as a kid, ironically. My very first book I ever read was called The Little Prince. And I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. And then I read Anne of Green Gables and I'm like, okay, this is really cool. And then I really just start, like, I just needed to find the right book, which I still say to this day, like, if kids don't love reading, they just haven't found the right book. So that's kind of how it started for me.
Is that true? You would say all through school and life, like it's all about finding the right book. I mean, I feel like a lot of times in school we try to push books on kids. Are you much more of the mindset of letting them try to figure it out on their own?
Yes, yes, and yes. So, so true. And I say this all the time, but in the real world, nobody cares what your reading level is. Okay, so let that sink in for just a minute. Because when school is done and gone, all kids have left is their own love of reading, their own desire to read, their own, what do I want to read today? Their own, what do I want to put in my Amazon cart today? No, there's nobody around telling kids what to read after school is done. So telling kids what to read is purely a function of school. But in the real world, nobody tells you what to read.
So
that comes from in you.
If you were in charge then, would you get rid of reading levels in school?
No, I don't think reading levels are bad, but reading levels were never intended for kids. So when Fontes and Pinnell wrote their guided reading book, their leveled reading instruction book in 1990, the leveling system was meant to help identify characteristics, attributes of text. so we as teachers could guide our instruction and help kids move through the levels, but levels were never intended to be shared with kids and parents. It's more of an instructional, like, identifier indicator for teachers. So text leveling is a gradient. And there's more, as kids get more conventions of language under their belt and conventions of phonics under their belt, the more we can push them, nudge them a little bit to the next level. It's in research, it's Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. And so we're always kind of, when kids can do most of the work, 90 to 95% of the reading work and decoding work on their own, if teachers are there to support and coach them on that 5 to 10%, we're just sort of nudging them always to the next level. And that's kind of the premise of leveled literacy instruction. So the levels aren't bad, but we do, in education, we do just sort of like I use this term, like we're data rich and information poor. We have numbers on kids, percentiles on kids, colors on kids, 1, 2, 3, 4s on kids. None of that helps kids get better at reading and writing. Kids need words. You need to, when you come to the first letter of a word, you need to make sure that the first letter out of your mouth matches the first letter in the word. Like, they need qualitative feedback, not like a number or a star or a color or whatever. You know what I mean?
So if I'm a parent at home right now and I'm sitting here like, man, they got me in quarantine and school's out and I don't know the first thing about how to help my kid with reading, where do I start? What specifically advice do you give that parent on where to start?
It's so funny that you say this. I actually took a note the other day about all the things I would love to do a Zoom with parents, saying, validating and affirming all the things that they can do at home. I should have pulled it up. But I don't think parents need to worry about trying to teach their kid how to read. The things that they can do at home are read to their kids, talk to their kids, have conversations with their kids, even things that might not seem like learning or teaching are totally learnable and teachable, like baking cookies or planting a flower, like a flower garden, or washing the car, doing the dishes, folding a shirt, folding a towel, making your bed. Like, all of those are life skills that lead towards independence, and they lead to confidence, which a parent's job is to help their child build skills to have those skills under their belt, and also confidence, like, hey, I can do stuff. Like, I know stuff and I can do stuff and I can do it on my own. I don't need somebody else to tell me. And there's lots of math involved in baking and making cookies and, following recipes and things like that. But just reading to your kids, talking to your kids, playing with your kids. When a child says to an adult, will you play with me? That's their way of saying, hey, let's talk. A child will never come out and say, Mom, like, I need to talk. Like, adults don't even say that. Mm-hmm. So when we say mask phrases, when we really mean, hey, I need to talk. So, like, let's play with me. So, parents, get down on the floor, play with your kids, go outside, throw a ball, like, spend that quality time. And the more you devote time with kids, like, where they feel like the most important thing for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, the more they will realize that you will put things down. You will put your to-do list down or your stuff down to go spend time with them. That's really important for parents. And all of those other things that they're doing too, like baking cookies, making fruit salad, making hamburgers, doing a camp out in the front yard, carving pumpkins, all of those things, those experiences, those activities, all end up being storylines in books that kids come soon to read. So the kids pick up a book, oh my gosh, it's called Fruit Salad, and it's about how to make fruit salad. So when we talk about building background knowledge and adding schema to your, background knowledge, all of those experiences add to it, and that is part of teaching and growing your child as a reader.
So almost like starting with the experience as the foundation, and then once the kid has the experience, taking the experience and bringing books to the experience versus here's a book, and then versus going the other direction. Does that make sense? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, and you can go both ways. Like you can read books about maybe like rock collecting, and then you can like start a rock collection. Or you can read, or you can like, again, bake cookies or make hamburgers and then read a book about a little boy who made hamburgers. Or like some of the younger books, like all of the Froggy books are about, oh, the main character, Froggy, has a problem. Obviously, all characters always have a problem. That's a huge element of plot. Character setting, problem, events to solve it, and a solution. That structure never changes in fiction. So Froggy always does something, like forgets something. He's very forgetful. That's very characteristic of that character. And so like he forgets his toothbrush. He's gone to sleepover and he forgets his toothbrush. And so talking about those experiences and how you might solve them, but just even like brushing your teeth and how to do that, and like why does Froggy need that? Or he forgot to, he's looking, he lost his bike helmet. He wants to go riding his bike and he can't find his helmet. Like what happens when we can't find things? Like how to work through and solve those problems, how the characters solve through that problem, how we could use the lesson that the character learned to help us when we encounter that problem.
And so I'm guessing it depends on the kid on which way you start, right? So I think a kid like me, I was a severe ADHD kid. I struggled with reading a lot when I was a kid, and it wasn't that I couldn't read. It's that I couldn't sit still long enough to read. I was just all over the place, you know, and in my seat, up, down, and then I would sit back down and I would try to read, and I would read the same line over and over again, and big bunches of words intimidate me. I remember the first thing when I was in school that I would do when a teacher gave an assignment to read is I would look to see how long it was. That was always my first thing. And if it was over a certain amount, I would immediately shut down.
Yeah, that's a big one for a lot of kids. Just like that, you know, we live in, education is so sort of rubric heavy, and so kids always want to know, like, how long does this have to be? What font do I have to use this in? You know, when is this due? How many vocabulary words do I need to use? And all of those sort of parameters limit creativity. Mm-hmm. But my daughter was actually the same way. She was like you. She still to this day has ADHD. She's 20, but she would always ask, you know, how long does this have to be? Because she was slow at reading, like her fluency was bad. We'd always read to her since she was young, so she's really smart. That's not the issue, but she always wanted to know how long things had to be, and she always wanted to know how much do I have to write in response to this, and can I just say it in words, because I'm much more articulate in speaking than I am in writing. So, and which in a way is probably like, think about this. So like reading is decoding. Reading is taking information from a book or the world, and the information is going in our brain. And writing and speaking are forms of expression coming out. And so when I said before that nobody in the real world cares about your reading level, what I failed to say was the way the world knows you can read is the second you open your mouth to speak or pick up a pen to write. So the way we know you can take information in and think about it is how you can get it out. Mm-hmm. So really helping kids with getting the words out and expressing themselves through writing and speaking is going to be important. But for kids that have a hard time writing, or say, how much do I have to write? A lot of teachers miss or skip the step of the process called oral rehearsal, where you have to say out first what you're going to write before you write it. And that helps a lot of kids out. In fact, when we're teaching our youngest, hold on, let me grab a piece of paper.
Yeah.
When we're teaching our youngest learners, a strategy that works really, really well.
When you say youngest, what do you mean by that?
Youngest, like emerging readers and writers, like kids that are learning to compose and get ideas down on paper, maybe kindergarten, first grade, even pre-writing. And so what we say to kids, like a lot of teachers say to kids, like, well, what do you want to write? Like, what are you going to write about? So we say, what are you going to write about today for your story? And the child might say, I'm going to write about my dog. And so when you say to kids, what are you going to write about? That question leads to a 1 or 2 word answer. Okay. So a child saying, oh, I'm going to write about my dog. And then the teacher will go, okay, we'll go on back to your desk and start writing it. But What we really need, we need to not send them back to their desk right away. And the next question we need to ask is, okay, what about your dog? Like, what are you going to write? Not just stop at asking, what are you going to write about, but what are you going to write? Because when you say, what are you going to write? Then a child is going to think, okay, like, what are the words going to be that are going to go across the page? And so we use a strategy with, it really, honestly, it's with any reader, or any writer, but it's like, I call it, say, tap, 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 write. So the child might say, okay, what am I going to write? I'm going to say, this weekend, me and my dog went for a walk in my neighborhood. My dog got off the leash and ran into Mrs. Miller's garden. So, something like that. So they're literally like tapping across the page, writing with it. And then the teacher's like, great, you sound like you're ready to write. Go back and start. And it is going to take a child a while to get that out. But if they can get it out orally first and tap across the page, they're like, even they feel like they know what they're writing. And they're less likely to like have that breakdown or sit there for 25 minutes and nothing. Because like the worst thing in the world a teacher wants is to tell kids, okay, this is what I want you to try as a writer today. Off you go, everybody back to your seat. And then the teacher finally gets around to those 1 or 2 kids, or maybe 5, and they have like nothing on their paper after 25 minutes. Yep. It completely wasted that time.
And for people who aren't watching us and are just listening, when you say tap, 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 you're tapping on a blank piece of paper. I mean, there's nothing on that piece of paper yet. It's just sort of, for the kid, it's sort of a thought process that these are where the words are going to go. And as the teacher, you know that the kid has information that they're going to write. Correct?
Exactly. Blank writing paper. The child is holding the paper. The child is tapping with their finger. They're basically tapping from left to right. Return sweep, left to right. They keep tapping across the page as if those are where the words are going to go when they get it on the paper.
Very cool. I love that idea. I got to try that with my kids. So I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and my 8-year-old loves to read. He absolutely loves to read. He's my wife. My wife is an avid reader, and he. So my question for you: he reads the same. So I don't know if I should get annoyed at this or not. Sometimes I get annoyed at him because he wants to read the same books over and over again. Do you have an issue with that for a kid?
No.
He loves Jack and Annie books, Magic Treehouse, and he reads Magic Treehouse over, and the same ones he'll read 2, 3, 4 times, and he just loves it and talks about it. And is that okay?
Yes, that is okay. That is absolutely okay. The more we let kids read what they want, the more they'll become better at reading, the more confident they'll become at reading. And the things that we do again and again and again, no matter what it is in our life, reading the same book, buying the same kind of creamer, buying the same brand, like that, like fluency in real life or at school literally only means 2 things: automaticity and familiarity. Something is so familiar, it becomes automatic. So when kids read books that they choose, read books that they love, 1, they're reading. So like, let's just celebrate that. And 2, the fact that he's making those choices sends the message to kids that the choices you make for yourself matter. When teachers are always selecting books for kids or snatching books out of kids' hands and saying, you can't read that, all that says to kids is, you can't make decisions for yourself. I know what's best for you. So, and that's not very empowering. That's bad. So I really think that that's okay if they find series that they love. And the really cool thing about when kids get hooked on a series is that if they can, it's like it propels them to read the next one and the next one and the next one. Yep. So just, again, builds more and more reading volume and capacity, which is great. All the while they feel like a reader. So like, Benjamin Bloom is really well known for the cognitive domains of learning, but he's less well known for the affective domains of learning, which is like how I feel about myself as a learner, my attitude and disposition towards basically my self-perception. So do you feel like your son feels like a reader?
Oh yeah. He loves to read, and it's his number one thing. I mean, he picks it over TV. If there's any time free, he just, you won't even know where he is, and then you go find him and he's got a book. I'm going to get emotional because sometimes I think I do the wrong thing as a dad. Sometimes like I hear myself, and I say this to both my kids sometimes, like I'll say, you're a better reader than that. Like you can already read that book. You should be reading higher level books or better quality books. And I'm thinking that might do the opposite of what I'm trying to do, as we do frequently with our own children.
Right. And we constantly, as parents, we're like, what do we do? Or even as teachers, right? And no teacher intentionally wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to snatch a book out of a kid's hand today and make them feel like a loser as a reader. Like no parent or teacher ever says that. But sometimes that's the effect of our actions. And we don't understand that that's what's happening on the other end. And, nothing will discourage a reader more than a teacher or a librarian always saying, you can't check that out. You can't, that's not your level. That's not your shelf. That's not your bin. That doesn't have the right color dot on it. Like, I mean, right. What are we trying to get here? Yeah. So I think if we can encourage a love of reading first and have kids have positive reading associations, positive mental associations with reading, then they will be more apt to read things that they have to read, like on a standardized test or directions or a map or just anything that they have to, if they want to read first. Yeah. But we're sometimes in education we do it backwards. We tell kids you have to read this, and a lot of principals fall into the trap. And again, they don't wake up in the morning and say I'm going to do this, but principals don't necessarily. A lot of principals, and this is a big generalization, but some principals say, I don't care if they love to read, just get them to read. Like they just have to pass the test. And so the question we need to be asking ourselves, or the question that principals need to be asking themselves is, are we creating able readers or are we creating avid readers? Because if we create avid readers, they will be able readers.
So an avid reader is defined as what?
An avid reader is more intrinsic, a one that like loves to read and just constantly just hungry for the books and loves it, and because he can do it.
And an able reader is somebody who just does it to go through the motions of doing it. I'm able to do it. And, it's like, I don't really feel like it. I don't really want to, but I will because I have to.
Absolutely. And there are kids that are like that can read, but they don't really enjoy it or like it. And they don't really like live what I call like a readerly life. Like they're not like a bookish kid, or, they don't turn into bookish adults. And one of the formative assessments I always tell teachers to do to get a little dipstick on how their kids are feeling towards their own assignments is I say, whenever you have kids do anything, reading, writing, math, even like a math time test or like a reading assignment, have the kids put a confidence rating at the bottom of the paper. 1 meaning, I don't really like doing this, but I just did it because you told me to and I'm being compliant here at school. And 4 means I love this. I would do this every day, all the time. Like, I love it. Do it with my eyes shut. And a lot of kids will get like 100% on a math time test, but put a 1 at the bottom. So that tells you that they're doing it and they can do it. They're an able mathematician, but they don't like doing it. And then there's going to be other kids that are going to have like 50% of the math problems wrong at the on the paper, but they're going to give a 4. Which tells you they don't have a confidence problem. They have a math problem.
So what do you do as the teacher for each one of those kids? If I'm the teacher and I see the 1, but they're great, or I see the 4, but they struggle, what specifically do I do next?
Well, you're going to have 4 piles, right? You're going to have a pile of kids that can do it and like it, who can do it but don't like it. That's a pile for a conversation. And then you're going to have kids that don't get it right and know they don't get it right. That's an intervention group. And then you have another pile that they don't get it, but they think they can. That's a conversation and an intervention.
What's the conversation, though, look like? So if you're having that conversation with the
conversation with the child that can do it but doesn't like it is more like getting in touch with them about their learning. And having conversations like, how can I help you? Like, I know that you can do this, but especially when it's like around reading, like I see that you can do this, but what can I do to help you love it? Like, I really want you to love reading, because you know how I love reading and I share my books with you. That's going to be a more of a long-standing relationship that we build with kids, and sharing the books with kids that we read, and getting kids excited about books, and helping kids find, like your son, helping kids find series that they love. That's where we're really trying to match readers with books, because those kids have not found the right book or the right series or the right genre or the right author that they like to read about yet. So that conversation is very teacher dependent. So the teacher, the hype, the spin, the excitement, the touching in with kids, that's a conversation where you say to kids, like, what do you like? I don't ever say to kids that are in that pile, I never say, what do you like to read about? Because they don't like to read. So I say, what do you like? Like in general, like in life, what do you like? Like I do little student interviews with kids, and they go, I like frogs, and I like trains, and I like motorcycles. And then even peel back one layer, and there's those kids that go, I don't like anything. You know, those kids who are like unmotivated by everything. And that's where you walk those kids down to the library and you say, you know, let's find some books in here that you like. And that really happened to me one day. I went to the library, I took a child down to the library, and he goes, I don't like any books in this library. And I said, really? Have you read them all? He said, no. And I said, I bet we can find some books in here for you. So I went straight to the motorcycle and monster truck section. That's usually like always a good place to start with reluctant boy readers. And he's like, oh, this, I could read this. And so he checked out from the library, and then he came back and he's like, I really like it, Mrs. Jones. I'm going to get another one. I'm like, great. I'm like, I mean, I didn't even think you liked it. So, I mean, that's cool. You kind of have to play cool with kids like that. But
Yep. Does it matter? Does it matter when they look at that monster truck book? Does it matter if it's mostly pictures? If it's mostly words? As a teacher, should I care at all about that?
No, not at that point, because what you're trying to do at the early stages of those types of kids is you're trying to help them develop their reading identity. You're trying to help them realize that they have things that they like and can read. So it's really not even about the book. It's more about the interest and the connection at first, really. And then once they start to believe that they're ready, like there's a great, excuse me, professional book. It's kind of a sleeper. It's not really well known, but it's called The Reading Turnaround. And it's by several different authors, and I don't know all of them. But The Reading Turnaround, the entire first chapter in that book is about helping kids develop their reading identity. And if there's one thing in education we need to be doing a better job it's helping more kids develop their reading identity sooner. Because there's so many kids in middle school and high school. Like I do work with middle school and high schools the kids are like already turned off. Like they're just like, I'm not reading. I'm not reading on my own if I don't have to. And I think that we need to help prevent that mindset and prevent that behavior and prevent kids from saying that.
So when you say reading identity, that's sort of like any other identity, kind of like a kid who's like, I'm a dancer, or I'm a baseball player, or I'm a reader. And then within reading, you're saying people develop identities. Like my son, how would you characterize him what's his identity, so to speak?
So like a child's reading identity is how they feel about themselves as readers. And a child that has a more developed reading identity, and substitute the word adult for child. So an adult that has a developed reading identity has books on their nightstand, has books on their device, can name authors they like, genres they like, series they like. They recommend books to other people. They have books on hold at the library. So there's these characteristics of a reader that identifies as a reader. Kids that don't have a reading identity, I always tell teachers, you'll know if a student in your class does not have a very developed reading identity, because they will go to your classroom library 10 times in 15 minutes. They'll be up and back, out of their seat, at the library, 10 times in 15 minutes. If you pick out a book you love because you're a reader, you go back to your desk and you sit down and you start reading. You need to get up 19 times. So that is a telltale sign that a child has not developed their reading identity, and because they are just picking out whatever.
And so if you see that as a teacher, then your recommendation is to just find a topic, right? So one of the things I say to teachers when they're struggling to build relationships with kids in school is sports, music, video games, money, animals, art. I'll add in trucks and cars, what you just said. There's 7 categories right there. And if you're not sure, pick one and just say to the kid, do you love this? Yes. And then you build around it.
Well, that's a great start, but for younger readers, I don't recommend like having a preloaded list. I recommend just ask them what they like and just start a list. Like it is as easy as taking a piece of college ruled notebook paper, writing your class list down the left on the left side of the blue line or red line or whatever, and then asking kids, what do you like? Just literally having
What do you like?
Yes, what do you like? Literally ask. It's a 3-minute interview. You're sitting down next with kids at the beginning of the school year and you're saying, hey, Brian, I'm so glad you're in my class this year. How lucky am I? And listen, I want to really help you grow as a reader this year. And in order for me to do that, I need to know some of the things that you like. And some kids are actually never asked that question in the first place. So they don't have answers ready to go. And then it's especially with the younger kids, like if you say, do you like, and you supply answers, they'll just say yes to everything you say because they think they're supposed to say yes. Like they don't understand I'm supposed to come up with my own or say, no, I don't like that. But I'll be like, and so I'll go first and I'll say to my child, okay, I'll go first. I like gardening and running and flying my kite, and I like designing things on the computer. I like reading. I like drawing. See how I like? See
Cookies,
how those
baking
things I
cookies.
like?
I'm guessing you like baking cookies too,
I
because
like
you
baking cookies. I do like baking cookies. Yeah, I like spending time in the kitchen and baking recipes. But so I will share
yeah.
with kids what I like first instead of saying, "Do you like blank 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 blank?" And then I'll just sort of role play what they're supposed to say, and then they'll say, oh, "Okay, so I like camping and teddy bears and pizza and gymnastics." And if they aren't supplying a lot of things, I'll say, "When you get home from school, what's the first thing you do?" Or on the weekend, if you could do anything you want, what would you do? Like instead of providing again answers, I try to steer
So if
towards
I
what.
say watch TV, if I'm the
Right.
kid and I say watch TV, what's the response? What do you say back?
I'll say, what do you which TV shows do you like to watch?
I usually like to watch sports.
Okay, so I'm going to write down sports, and I'll say, oh, sports. That's a lot of things in sports. Do you like summer sports, like running or track or horseback riding or swimming, or do you like indoor sports like skiing and try to steer them towards a narrower scope there? But I'll write sports down on there because what can happen is and once I have all the kids' interests, you can even make a bulletin board out of it. So it can say Jennifer, and then it can say gardening, cooking, baking, running, swimming, and then it can say Brian, trucks, sports, making podcasts, photography, whatever, all your things. And everybody can have 4 or 5 interests, and then kids can go over to that board and they can see, oh, and then kids can form their own interest-based reading clubs, topic-based reading clubs, or the teacher can as well. Just sort of make sort of like all of that public, like, oh, we do have more things in common with each other than I thought.
Yeah, and I think what a great way to build relationships amongst kids,
Yes.
right? Kids who often don't get a chance to talk to each other or see each other. All of a sudden now you got this big bulletin board up in the room, and it shows Jen Jones baking cookies and gardening, and now I can say, hey, I was thinking about learning how to do this. Can you show me? And I think kids are much more interested in helping other people when it's something they're good at versus something they're not good. I think that's true with anybody, but certainly with kids. I love when teachers ask me about difficult students because I'm good at it and I love doing it. If you ask me how to help you fix your car, I'm going to be like, I'm good. Like, I don't even want to try it. You know what I mean? And so that gives kids a visual image in the classroom of something they can do to help each other. You could do that. There's a lot of spin-offs you could do of that. I love that
Mm-hmm.
idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And like kids or adults get better at doing it by teaching it to somebody else. So kids will get better at, you know, like you can even have a board like that with apps. kids, like I might be really good at Pit Collage and Fonto, but another kid might be really good at Seesaw and Epic or something. And so kids can go to those app experts, and then I can teach you how to use Pit Collage, and you can teach me how to use the one you're good at. And so like, I think that's great. Like one of the ways at Lake Myra, the last elementary school that I was at before I retired from the school system, is we were a one-to-one school, and even in kindergarten, and the kindergartners, there's a lot of repetitive moves on an iPad, like, copy, save, export, crop, blah, 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 take a picture, save it, send it, blah, blah, blah. So we had some fifth grade students that were some behavior problems in the classroom, and we assigned them to be fifth grade techsperts. We called them techsperts. And so they would go to the kindergarten classroom every single morning, and they had a kindergarten buddy, a tech buddy, and they were techsperts. And their behavior went way down in the classroom because they felt like, oh my gosh, like I'm being valued, and I have someone seeing me for my worth, and I can help a little kid, and my job matters, and I don't want my job taken away. Yeah, so good.
Power and control. It's a classic move that I think a lot of schools struggle with, right? A lot of schools take the discipline problem kid and they have them be in trouble. And I'm with you. I say take them and have them help other people, right? Helping someone else. When you're helped your entire life, you become helpless, right? And so it's really good when you can flip that on its head. And the other thing I teach teachers is to no longer look at a kid as a behavior problem. I don't actually think there's any such thing as behavior problem children in school. I think behaviors for kids are solutions. They're not problems. The real problem is I struggle over here, I can't do this, or I can't do that. What should I do to show that, oh, I know, let me disrupt class. That'll get the teacher's attention away from noticing what my behavior is. And reading and behavior go together. I mean, it's amazing how kids who don't feel confident in reading frequently disrupt class. That was me. I remember when I was in fourth grade and they would do this round robin reading where one kid would go first and then the other kid would pick up where that kid left off, and we would go around the room. And the anxiety that gave me as a kid, because I didn't know where it was going to land. And so I wouldn't be listening to any of the other kids reading. All I would be doing is trying to figure out which spot am I going to get stuck in, or caught in. And it would be like this wave coming around the room. And before it got to me, I would just knock something off the desk, or I would just kick something hard.
Don't even let that happen.
Well,
don't even let that get you.
The class would laugh, but in my mind, they were laughing at me being bad versus being stupid. I never wanted to look stupid in front of my friends, and they're going to laugh at me one way or the other. So I always picked bad over dumb,
Right. Absolutely. And I think we see that all the time. And just for the record, that round robin practice is not a best practice for lots of reasons. I read a blog post a couple years ago called 27 Reasons Why Round Robin Reading is Not a Best Practice, as if the first two aren't enough. But the number one main reason that it's not a best practice is because when kids only read page 1, 5, 10, and 15, they're not reading the whole thing of anything. So you can't comprehend anything if you don't read all of it. Okay. So, and the second reason is what you were talking about, the anxiety and this, excuse me, that just sort of like, it's frustrating and creates anxiety for the low readers and the high readers, because the high readers are like sitting here like waiting for the kid to say refrigerator, and they're like, and the high readers are like, it's refrigerator. Would you just say refrigerator? And what happens is there is physiological things that happen inside your body when you want to do something, but you can't because the anxiety has taken over. The chemicals have been released. You go into fight or flight. And even if you sort of calm down a little bit and you maintain, you don't like knock the thing off the desk or fall out of your chair or whatever, and it does come to your turn and you try to hold it together and get the words out. Even if you know the words, the physiological chemicals have been released and you just physically can't get the words out of your mouth. So it's just not a good practice to put kids in that situation in the first place. that round
What are
robin
some
reading.
others? What are some other common practices that you know of or you see in school that are not best practices that you see teachers do frequently that they should
Um,
just watch out for? Is there anything that they should just watch out? If I'm listening to this and I'm kind of new as a teacher and I'm not exactly sure, what are some practices that I need to avoid that might be common pitfalls?
I don't know. You've really put me on the spot
I'm
with that
sorry.
one.
I'm sorry,
Well,
because
I
that
mean,
was a good one. That one you just mentioned was a good one. So that my thought was, I wonder if there's any others that teachers do that as a kid, I'm sitting there, like, what about reading groups? Like, I know the reading groups are a big thing where they have, everybody knows who the high, middle, and low are. They try to give them letters or
right.
not letters, but colors or like, what
Yeah.
about that? Is that good practice?
Um, yeah. So reading groups, is small group instruction is one of the biggest bang for your buck ways to like reach a lot more kids in a more like higher elevated differentiated way for sure. Um, we do things like a guided reading group. The common denominator of a guided reading group is the level, but you also want to pull strategy groups. And strategy groups are where it doesn't, regardless of the child's reading level, they aren't getting or using the strategy. Now, strategies are sort of irregardless if you can do the skill. So a lot of times in education, the terms skills and strategies are thrown around as if they're synonyms, but they're not. So skills are like the overarching like what we want kids to do. We want kids to like inferring, clarifying, predicting. Those are the comprehension skills we want kids to be able to do. A strategy is you could do it. There's 2, 3, 4, 5 ways you can predict, clarify, determine importance, questioning, those types of things. And so, I think of strategies as like tools in a shed. Like you go to the shed to get the tool you need on the day you need to use, on the day you need to like hammer. So like when you want to pound something, like the skill is pounding, you go get the hammer, you pound it. If you know how to pound something in without going to the shed to get the hammer, definitely pound without the hammer. So like it's like we give kids strategies if they need them, but if they can do the skill without the strategy, great. But strategy groups are a really good small group instruction because you can have 5 kids in a strategy group who all cannot, let's say, summarize. Summarizing is really hard for kids. I would say summarizing, I can tell you why summarizing is difficult for kids in a minute, but summarizing, let's say you have a child that's like on like reading level J, P, Q, and Z. Like you have kids that are a range of reading levels, but they all are struggling with summarizing. So you would pull those kids to a summarizing group and you've collected that data. They're not good at summarizing because you've read their summaries, you've listened to their oral summaries, they're not good at it. So you're going to reteach your summarizing lesson to those kids, and then you're going to watch them and help them summarize right in front of you before you sort of release them to go back and try it again. So it's like a double dose at tier 1.
What does that
But
look? What does that sound like? If I'm the teacher and I have that reading group, so be that teacher? What do I do?
Well, that summarizing strategy reteaching. So a strategy reading group is not new teaching. It is the reteaching of the mini lesson that you originally taught the whole class a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, and those kids still aren't doing it. So when you want to do a strategy group, you literally go and pull out your mini lesson plan from your whole group lesson and reteach it to that small group. And it basically, like, the structure of a lesson goes something like, guys, you know how we've been working on summarizing? You know how summarizing means saying what the author said, but in a shorter way and in your own words? They're going to go, yeah. And I go, I noticed that a lot of you are just copying off the page. Let's just say that's what they're doing. And I would say, let me show you how to do it again. So we're going to take a sentence or we're going to take a paragraph. I'm going to model it. You use the same gradual release of responsibility in a strategy group that you would in a mini lesson. So we're going to do it, and then you're going to each do it. So you still follow that format. And then they try it, then you try a sentence together. We kind of compose a new summary of a sentence or a paragraph together. And then they pick a paragraph out of their each individual book basket. So when kids come to the strategy group, they need to bring their own book bag or book bucket with them, which is something you asked me earlier, what's something that schools don't do that they should do. That's something that I'll talk about in a second. So they each have their own bag or basket of books, and they're going to pick one sentence or one page out of there. When kids can't summarize a whole book, you have to peel back the layer to a chapter. When they can't summarize a chapter, peel back to a paragraph. When they can't summarize a paragraph, peel back to a sentence. Like, just go back as far as to when they can do it and then add back on.
Should the summarizing always be spoken, or can it be written? Or
It should be both.
both?
It should be both. So like I was saying earlier, like if you can't write it, or if you can't write a summary, you should speak a summary. And that's a guided reading practice I use all the time. And, you know, guided reading is really like, again, guided reading is not new teaching. While they're all at the table on the same reading level, your kids we really want kids to, like, that's really practice. It's like daily practice, creating reading habits. So like even when principals say to teachers, I want you to write your objectives on your lesson plan, right? Principals say that all the time, write your objectives on your lesson plan. So your objective for your mini lesson, your reading lesson, is teaching kids how to do one skill or strategy and sending kids off to do it. One of the mistakes that teachers make in the first place when it comes to like discipline or kids getting off track or off task is teachers don't keep their mini lesson to 10 minutes or less, which is based on their attention span, which is based on brain research. And so when teachers teach and talk too long, their mini lesson turns into a maxi lesson. And 45 minutes later, the teacher is still talking and kids are squirrely and fooling around on the rug. And that is the teacher has talked too long. So we keep our mini lesson to 10 minutes. We give kids time to turn and talk and process. So I don't need to tell you this, Brian, but you know, brain research shows that a kid's attention span is the same number of minutes as their age. Yeah. And it doesn't mean the teacher stops talking after 5 minutes to 5-year-olds. It means the teacher stops the lesson and lets kids process what she just said out loud, and like, because it was all coming in, and the kids has to like get it out. So it gives kids time to do that. And so all age kids need to do that. Like, you know, my daughter would come home from high school and she'd be like, oh my gosh, my teacher talked the whole 57 minutes and let us talk for the last minute. And I'm like, oh, brother. But, you know, so, I mean,
when you do a professional development yourself, when you're conducting a PD, do you run it the same way where you give info and then you let them process?
Yep. That's a really great modeling strategy, is to say, because teachers are the same way. It's, you know, staff meetings are the same way. The principal gets up and and it's pretty much adult attention spans really tap out around 12 to 15 minutes. So even though we're all older than 15, yeah. That's about when our brain stops. The tank is full. Yep. We need to stop talking. Principals need to stop talking and like have table talk time. And, you know, as people talk, as we present, the people that are listening to us, they've got lots of ideas in their head. They're making things that we say are making them think of other things, and they're making connections, and they're thinking, oh, I could use this in math, or I could use this. And so, all the little sidebars that happen during a staff meeting, it's because they have things they want to say. They're having little triggers going off in their brain. And so we need to stop and honor with kids and adults that it's making us have other connections. We need to get them out to process it. I do that in my PD all the time. It's harder virtually. I'm trying to use the chat rooms in Zoom. But I will also say, like, okay, I'm going to give you a minute right now. I want you to jot down three things I just said, or three of the most important things I just said right now. Just give them like stop time, think time, reflection time.
I was just going to ask that question. That was going to be my next question. So how do you find that to be virtually? Because I think the virtual thing, you know, I'm doing right after when we get done, I'm doing a virtual PD, and I've done a few of them, and it's just different. It's different. And I feel like as the presenter, it's harder for me to give them time to talk, so to speak, with each other, because they're not with each other. And
right.
You know, so I think it's just the learning curve that goes into it, which is basically anything.
Yeah, it is for sure. And teachers are experiencing this same dilemma teaching remotely with their kids, especially the teachers that are not allowed to teach live, like on Google Meet or Zoom, where they have to pre-record their lessons and they really don't have any live feature of their lessons. But kids are learning to unmute themselves and talk and have a discussion and like do some group work, which is so brave for teachers to be doing that. And kids want that so bad. I think one of the things about this remote teaching situation that we've kind of forgotten about is the fact that so many kids come to school for those friendships, to see their friends and just be social with people their own age.
Agreed. And I've spent a lot of time on my podcast talking about my daughter's teacher and how amazing she has been. She teaches live every day. So every day she teaches live, full blown. She does about an hour and a half a day. It's incredible. I mean, she's not. I don't think people should try to be her, to be clear. I think she just
sets
doing
the bar
this.
high.
Yeah, she really has. She's really set the bar high, but it's interesting to watch that really what the most important thing is the connections. It's my daughter getting to see her friends and getting to smile and laugh. And so, a kid showing their house and saying, oh, look at what, this is where I sleep. And that's really what the kids are they're interested in her lessons too, but not nearly like they're interested in the relationship / connection piece, which is why I've been saying I think school will always be there. I think this is right now we're on a detour, but I don't think, I think remote learning is possible. And I think we're learning that. I think we're seeing that, the playbook is being written on how to do remote learning at a really high level, but I don't think it will ever replace school. At least I really hope it doesn't.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And the other thing that we're not really acknowledging is that for some kids, they are thriving in this situation. They are showing their creativity, and a teacher will say, document your day in a journal through an app like Seesaw or something. And some kids are making these elaborate collages and photo collages and like interviewing their grandparents and like doing these major things. And it's like, whoa, they probably would never have shown it in that way, in the classroom. And the other thing that you just said that I just want to say for teachers that are just trying to, provide lessons that are, I don't know. I just feel
tread
like
water, tread water.
What,
the ones that are you
the
talking
ones
about?
that are trying to tread water. Yes, the ones that are trying to tread water and just like, what do I do? And I'm not tech savvy and I don't belong to all these apps. And my advice is always just keep it simple. Keep it simple. Kids need to read for 20 minutes every day, read something every day, write something every day. And, that's my advice for parents to sort of like loop around to the very first question you asked me about parents in this time. It's not about what kids do. It's not even about what kids read. It's just the fact that they need to do it every day. So much of our behaviors and our habits about in life and reading and our actions and even just bathing, just hygiene, just brushing your teeth every day, taking a bath every day, eating correct, drinking water every day. It's about daily habits. It's about doing it consistently every day because things become habits by doing them every day. And if we can teach that to parents, because parents are not always great role models at doing things habitually or consistently. But that's really what kids need is the daily sitting down and practice. And, parents don't need all the fancy logins to this website and that website because they can't keep it all straight anyway. And parents are just holding it together as it is. But the back, the most important thing is with all of this is just consistency with whatever they're doing. Just make sure they read every day, write every day, and just make sure they do that every day.
Do you have any specific apps that you highly recommend that you think every parent should have if they're trying to get their kid to read or practice reading or work on reading? Are there any that you love off the top of your head?
No, not really, because
I'm
not really like the mindset that a computer can teach your kid how to read.
Yeah,
Like that's the problem that a lot of schools make in districts is they buy and they purchase all these fancy computer programs and iReady and iStation and they say kids you have to log in for so many minutes per week and it's like a computer is not going to teach a kid how to read. I mean, even in these times, a computer program or software is not the answer to teaching kids how to read. It's reading to your kids letting your kids read to you, reading the newspaper, having kids write notes, grocery lists, like make it as real world as possible. Like this is the time to really make reading and writing as real as possible and authentic as possible.
Yeah, very good. Any last bits of advice that you want to leave people with? Any great golden nuggets you got? You
Gosh, my
shared so
golden.
much good stuff.
Good, Brian. I'm so glad. Um, I don't know. I just feel like teacher. This time has really amazed me. Teachers, I feel like, have gone beyond what they even thought they were capable of. I think parents have had a lot of realizations about what they're capable of in hard times and their children, and maybe more parents are realizing a little bit, learning more about their kids. I think this time, we can always find something to learn in hard times, and I feel like this is one of those times where we can learn a little bit more about each other, talk to each other more, spend quality time with each other more, like just to always find the good in everything. Instead of dwelling on the complaining. We can probably spend less time on our phones right now. I feel like social media use is way up because everybody has, time. But I don't know. I just feel like we just need to find the good in everything. I do professional development for teachers. I don't necessarily do it so much for parents. It's kind of like, something that I could go to. But I don't know, I just feel like to follow me on social media would be a good idea.
Same though. I think teaching people the skill, right? Like you taught me as a parent. I'm so glad. I was my number one thing I wanted to get out of this conversation was how I approach my own kids really when they read, and just letting them be really more than anything is sort of what I've gotten from you. If they're actively doing it, let them do it and get out of their way. Like don't get in their way. And that's really what I need to, I think, be aware of myself is don't be a nagging, annoying parent and who's trying to take a book out of a kid's hand. Like it doesn't make sense. And I don't want to be that parent, but I think sometimes I am.
Yeah, and and the other thing that parents can do, and teachers can help parents do, is teach parents praise phrases. Like parents don't always know the right lingo to say to kids. They don't always know the right way to praise a child. So we can teach parents to say, "Oh, fabulous, fantastic, way to go." Like actually teach them some words to use. I call them praise phrases. But it really is like parents don't always have the language to say to their kid, like, a good job. And in the absence of knowing what to say to your kid, unfortunately, a lot of times what parents say is, like, they'll look at a piece of, like, a test, a spelling test with, 16 out of 20 or 9 out of 20, or they'll look at a piece of writing with, like, marks all over it. And so a parent will look at it and go, well, what the hell is this? And it'll go straight for the, like, why'd you get so many wrong? Like, so I guess just to always teach parents, like, to look at the bright side of what they did. Like, oh, you got 9 out of 20 last week, but you got 16 out of 20 this week. Like, you're making improvements.
Yeah.
Like, what did you do different this week? Like, or even like a child who comes home with like a math or brings home a math problem and like they didn't show their work correctly, like to ask their kids, like, well, what did you do right? Like, tell me about the problems that you did do right. Like, at what point did it stop working for you? Like helping parents not always go straight for the what did you do wrong or why did you get it wrong or you
You
know
reminded me of a student I used to teach. So when I was teaching little kids, there was a girl in my class who kicked another kid. I saw it was right in front of me. We were sitting down and she kicked this boy. And I had decided that she wasn't going to be allowed to go on a field trip. I don't want to get into whether that was the right move or wrong move, but I had just sort of made that decision. But I also had a strategy called take a shot. And take a shot was anytime I had made a decision in my class for a kid that they didn't like, they were allowed to take a shot to convince me I was wrong. And they could write it. They could speak their shot. They could write their shot. It was kind of like for the kids who were going to be lawyers, that's like your
right.
final argument. And so she came up to me and she goes, Mr. Mendler, I admit it. I kicked him. And I said, good. And then she looks at me and she goes, but just so you know, I was going to kick him like 5 other times this morning and I didn't. Isn't that what you call self-control? And I go, yeah. She goes, you love baseball. If I was up to bat 6 times in a game and I got 5 hits out of 6 times up, would I have had a really good game or a really bad game? And I said, you would have had a really good game. She goes, then I had a really good morning because I only kicked him once and I was going to do it 6 times. I should be allowed to go on the field trip. And she walked away from me. And I was like, it was like the best argument ever. But again, you're talking about looking at looking beyond what you exactly see, right, is sort of the I think the message. It's like, it's easy to see that those red marks on the paper or the negative points on the paper. And I think sometimes as teachers, we get caught up in that. And as the parent, I think it's really helpful to go, and as a teacher, both, to go beyond that and try to see what's actually driving it to there.
Well, absolutely. And I tell teachers all the time too, as well, when kids are learning to write and they're writing and composing and they don't spell correctly, they don't have composition correctly or conventions down, like writing on a child's paper, like literally with a red pen or a pink pen or a blue pen, or just literally writing on top of a child's paper, crossing a word out and spelling it correctly. Like a lot of kindergarten and first grade teachers will write the correct spelling underneath the word so like an adult can read it. Mm-hmm. But all that tells a child is, I can do it better than you. Mm-hmm. And writing and spelling is one of those things that it takes time to develop. No child is going to be 100% mastered in every spelling strategy, spelling structure, spelling pattern, phonogram, syllable, convention, punctuation, grammar at the end of one grade. So kids are always working on something as a writer. So instead of focusing on what you're not good at, focusing on what you are good at. And teachers say to me, well, what am I supposed to do if I'm not supposed to write it right under the word? And I'll say, don't write on their paper at all. Write on a sticky note on the side, a conversation. Because if a child's work is readable, like if a child wrote IWINTONABOTRID. Mm-hmm. I went on a boat ride. If a teacher corrects and spells BOAT and RIDE, one, again, like I said, it tells the child, like, I can do it better than you. But it's not necessary to do that on those words because it's readable. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so those are conversations that we happen on the side. And maybe we have like a little long I silent E intervention with them on spelling things, because sometimes kids haven't learned how to flip the switch to those long vowel patterns yet.
So don't tear up a kid's paper is what you're saying. Like, really, I mean, be really careful marking up a kid's paper, which that's another mistake that definitely happened to me frequently as a kid. And I think I did as a teacher. So just got to watch out for it. Listen, these hours go so quick. They always hold me to
an hour. I know they go fast. And just want to reply to that one thing you said, was that we need to help teachers and parents now in education is so much more. We need to focus on process over product and progress over perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate you doing this. It was a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better, and I look forward to us hopefully at some point catching up in person. That would be great to do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Have a great day. Anytime.
You as well. Good to see you.
All right. Bye-bye.